Got my new my new Surface Pro 8.
Wow, I think I'm still on 3.
We just got authorized as resellers, commercial resellers through our distributors for those.
Oh,
So
very cool.
I went ahead and picked up one because I've been wanting one for a while. So I know that's not what this is about today, but
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately
no.
not. Today we welcome everybody. We are the Reboot. Today we're going to talk about information rights management, sensitivity labeling, and give you some examples. And well, first of all, an understanding of what that is, and then some examples and ways in which you can implement this process into your own company. Before we get started here, I am Brian Bradgee with B&L PC Solutions, based out of Long Island, New York.
And I am Dave Groot with WinStar Technologies, based out of Culpeper, Virginia.
Welcome, welcome. So information rights management again. So a lot of the stuff that we do tend to talk about security, and I'm sure with fair certainty that some of this kind of sounds there's some overlapping discussions
Yeah.
that we have, and that's fine. But they may sound similar, but they everything we talk about is sort of unique and specific in its own way. So information rights management in a nutshell, and I'm sure Dave, you can kind of sweep up after me. It's more of a discipline that involves the managing, controlling, and securing of content from unwanted access. In a nutshell, it's a subset of what's called digital rights management, which has been around for a long time, and that's where you have your copyright protections on your DVDs and your audio on your digital media. Information rights is now extended that to the corporate world and the end user experience, which involves data encryption and a couple other things that we can talk about. How did I do there? All right.
No, that's pretty good.
Okay.
It's right on, right on. Everything you said was accurate.
Okay. Good.
But I mean, so yeah, the information rights management when it comes to the Microsoft ecosystem is certainly, it's part of that whole DLP, right? The data loss prevention. And then, yes, like you said, the encryption and sharing externally or otherwise of company assets and sensitivity labeling. Now, I think it's important to make sure that we start by saying this requires enterprise licensing.
Yeah, I think I thought at one point it may have been included with Business Premium, but maybe not. Maybe pieces of it were under the security or the, but I did check it out, and you're right. It's at the E3. I think is the start of it, right?
Yeah, so you got E3 and then E5, and E5's the granddaddy. You got everything kind of stuff. With E3, there's also a package called E5 compliance and security. So you can take the compliance and security aspects, upgrades per se, of the E5 and apply them to E3. I'm waiting to see Microsoft make it so that we can apply that to Business Premium, because realistically, that's where that's where the need is. I know the enterprise segment needs those things, but the small business, when it comes to cybersecurity, ransomware, insider threats, all those kinds. I mean, that's a huge open gap, and needs to be filled.
Yeah, even in the SMB, I mean, you got companies, 50, 75 users. I mean, they're not maybe not considered the enterprise level, and they're already paying their 20 something a month for their Business Premium, and to get hit on top of that, again, it's another cost that
it is, but think, like, you're right, Brian. It is another cost, and at some point you got to start saying, like, when are we losing advantages, right? Like, when is it costing more than the gain? It's a balance, right? But the bottom line is this: as you start, like, we recently implemented this, and we're actually still in the process of kind of tweaking the policies and such in our company. And as when you start to grow and add more staff, all of a sudden information data becomes overwhelming, right? Because people are saving things in different locations, they're creating stuff on their own computers and saving it to their desktop, they're not putting it in the SharePoint, whatever's happening, right? And it goes all over the folk. So with this particular product or this particular service, you're able to classify buckets of data, right? So you can say this is allowed to be shared externally, this is not allowed to be shared. This is, like you said, we can't print, we can't forward. We, those are all the end result of being able to put in these labels and then
Mhm.
determine what actions can be taken with those particular labels. And then you can set up defaults, and it really does require you to kind of visit your data, though. You're going to need to get a handle on that, because there is no one size fits all. And don't make the mistakes that I made and just say, okay, we're encrypting everything and nothing is shareable unless I say so. And then
Right.
everybody in my organization the next day tells me, okay, every email we've sent out this morning has been encrypted and the people can't open them on the other side because you auto labeled those emails as, private information. So
Yeah.
take
Now,
care.
how does this come into play if someone is using an external encryption, email encryption service?
So it's completely outside of that scope. The encryption itself is handled through the Microsoft ecosystem, and you can say when you're sharing, you can opt to make them have to have a Microsoft account. Doesn't have to be in your tenant, but they have to have, so that we can tell for sure they are who they say they are. Or you can make it an anonymous, decryption capability, or not even encrypted at all, just depending on
Right.
what it is you're looking to do. Um, and again, the key element, why does any of this matter? I think it's about knowing when things are being deleted, right? So, like, let's say you have an employee who's disgruntled or who's getting ready to retire, and just for whatever reason they lost it and they want to, like, walk out the door and blow the
Yeah.
place up on the way out. They start deleting all your data. You're going to kind of want to know that that's taking place, right? Or look, legitimately, you create a file and you share it with a partner externally, and you forget, and 2 years later that share is still open, right? And like, okay, the person you were dealing with at that company is no longer there, but somebody else is in their department and they got access to it. And, like, it's okay, maybe it's not, but you got to be aware of it. If you're not watching for those things, if this is what these systems are helping us to do, is to manage all that. And I will say, and I know I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry, but
That's okay. No.
it gets easier with all of these things. They seem like a very huge mountain of arduous work in front of you, and the only thing I can say is whittle away, do the easiest things with the greatest impact first, and just kind of start, like, what's the most important data? Okay,
Yeah.
lock
Yeah.
that
You
down.
gotta
That's the
identify
stuff.
that, right?
Yeah.
Identify that, and you can actually you can have your IT company, or if you have IT in house, they can run an audit and find sensitive data to kind of just help try to tackle this. And again, this is not something that maybe you don't have in house IT, and if
Right.
you're watching this as a business owner or an end user, it's something that your outsourced IT can certainly or should be able to handle for you. So the tests on our end are can be egregious, but that's on us to do
Hmm.
that and accomplish that. And with the understanding that we're going to identify this data, whether it be for compliance purposes or HR purposes, whatever it is, and identify that data and classify it, label it, and then work with you on how we're going to limit the access to that data. Now, does this is kind of, even though it's similar to DLP,
Hmm.
DLP is also a separate configuration also.
And DLP is something that you do have access to in business premium.
Right.
Basically, so just to kind of sort of differentiate between the two, if I can
Yeah,
keep it
I think it's
simple.
important to do that. Yeah.
So the information rights management is about who can access, who can print, who can share, who can do the different things. But when it comes to DLP, let's say a good example would be somebody sending an email out, and it contains private information or social security number or banking routes, right? We can set up data loss prevention rules that detect that and then automatically force encryption upon that email so that it isn't sent clear text and therefore some kind of a data breach, right? Like, that's a very simple explanation of what it's
Yeah.
for, but that's kind of, it'll look for passport numbers. You can put any strings you want. You can create your content types, what it is you're looking to find and watch for. But generally, it's things like passports, banking information, social security numbers, GDPR, any of that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And it can catch that automatically.
Right.
As well as DLP is also about outbound forwards and such, right? Like for business email compromise, we want to make sure that we know if there's a forward on a email account to an external email address, right? Because a hacker is trying to get emails sent to them so they can see what's going on or something like that. That's all part of that DLP infrastructure, and they kind of work together.
They do. Now, somebody that has let's talk about the average clients. They have maybe 1 or 2 servers in-house, file servers, domain controllers. They're just doing file and print sharing, and then they also have Office 365, using Teams in some capacity, and email. Now, in order for information rights management let's start with the encryption piece of it. That data has to live in SharePoint, correct?
So it starts, yes, the SharePoint and OneDrive are your main focal points, but
so that's important because a lot of people may not be using that right now and have all their stuff right on a file server, just sitting there saying, all right, let's do this. And it's not a matter of enabling it on that file server. It's a matter of
it can be.
It can be. I know.
Yeah, there is now ways that and they're making it more and more, right? Like even with DLP, they're trying to move it to the infrastructure in-house aside from the cloud, because it touches everything. And yeah, that's a limited. That's where a SIM product, or I had to bring SIM up, Brian. It's just my rule every time we talk. It's my favorite new thing in life. But really, I mean, that is, that's what that kind of stuff can help with, right?
Yeah. So as far as like we talked about, we identify the data that you want, and then now we have to kind of classify that data and figure out who has access and what kind of access. Maybe this department can read everything, but they can't change or edit, or they can't, and that gets done right on the Microsoft side of things. Once you build out
that's the policies that you're creating. Yep. And it can actually be intelligent where you can start to have it learn based on content types and that kind of stuff, where it'll auto classify as well.
Okay. And then now you had mentioned talking about somebody that maybe had access to something, but then on the client side, but then has left the company and somebody has replaced them, and you can put auditing tracks in there as well, right?
Yeah, you can put auditing, but you can also put expiration, right? So like when you're creating a share, you can say in 30 days this share goes away, because we're done with the project. I mean, it's whatever, and you can always extend that or change it. I'm just using generalizations, but certainly, yes, there is auditing. There's reports that you can pull that show every external shared file in the organization. Again, very important to understand. This requires enterprise licensing to do that. Unfortunately, it's not involved in the business premium stuff. You can do a lot of things in business premium, but I cannot run a report that tells me what files have been shared externally.
Yeah. Do you know how Microsoft licenses that tenant? Is it for everybody has to have it, or only the people that need access to it?
It's just the people who need access to it.
Okay. Yeah. So if someone wants to implement this,
you can mix and match. Yep.
You can. Right. Okay. Yeah. So we can say that, there's 20 people in finance, compliance, accounting, whatever it is. Those 20 people need to use this.
Yes.
Or to have IRM set up. But then the other 70 people just need business premium. But now can that data coexist? Meaning that if I'm one of those people that has this encrypted data,
well, it still falls into the bucket of, are they
who they are?
It's an internal person, right? But are they able to view that data, right? So like in my office, I have internal only, which is everybody, but then there's need to know, and that's me, right? Like me and maybe Steph, like nobody else needs to know any of this information, but it's internal, and I actually have a mixture of licenses throughout all the, for my users and such. So they cannot So they would have to be affected by the policy applied to a document or to a team or group or email, um, but they would not be able to change them or add or classify. Does that make sense?
Yep.
They would only be, if they're allowed, they're allowed. If they're not
Right.
allowed, they're not.
Now, I've also seen information rights management applied to Outlook. I've received emails before.
That's what I told you. I applied a encryption. Basically I had a category called general, and that's just stuff that's not generally created for public consumption, but isn't necessarily confidential, right? It's just internal things. And so I thought that was a safe place to start. Well, that was encrypting, and it wasn't sharing unless you gave explicit permissions. And so when you sent an email, by default, it was putting a general label on it and encrypting that. And so the people on the other side couldn't open up the email. They couldn't read the messages.
Okay.
So I had to fix that.
Yep. Wisely.
But that's what, that's the part that, with all this stuff, right? All of these things, you don't just throw it all in one day and be done. You have to ease in. You got to identify, and you hit the high spots first, right? Like, again, highest impact, lowest cost, lowest effort, whatever that is, get those things taken care of and immediately, and then start working on all the other little ancillary details, and over time you're going to get there.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it.
Yeah. Can a vulnerability scan or a pen test test these policies? Do you know?
Yes. It's funny you mentioned that, because we're actually the people that we're working with that do our third-party pen testing audits are developing scans that will go through and look and see, do you have sensitivity labels turned on, and then look for problems in that configuration and setup, as well as share documents that might not be, so it can be done. It's about, here's the keys. When you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, you need to make sure, especially when you're on enterprise level, in the compliance center, which is now called Purview, you need to make sure auditing is turned on, because by default it is not.
I thought they didn't change that to defaulted on. No. Okay.
Not from what I'm seeing.
Okay.
It's worth checking regardless.
Sure.
Because if you have an older tenant or something like that, it doesn't, it didn't get the new deal or whatever, but just make sure that that's turned on, because that's going to give you, and I'll tell you, one day, if you want, we'll get into it. I'll share screens, and I'll show you the nitty-gritty detail you can pick up in the Microsoft cloud, just from the endpoint manager and Microsoft, stuff being loaded on your computer. The amount of information that they can pull out of there is crazy. I mean, we're using all kinds of that stuff. It's just insane.
Yeah, I think kind of the change here is from the basic network administration that we used to provide, and assigning roles and permissions, and those days seem to kind of be it's kind of changing over to this SharePoint cloud-based environment that we all live and breathe in, and it's a completely different administrative level, and there's a lot of, you go into that Microsoft Admin Center, and it's just, you can get buried.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Levels of, and I'm like, I forgot what I went in here for, and it's just so
that happens to me like every day.
And I've gotten to points where I'm so deep into something, and it just says Microsoft, you're gonna pop up like, are you sure you want to do this? Because you can block everybody out. I'm like, nope, close out. You gotta doubt yourself.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes I'll get bored on the weekend, right? And I'll start mucking around, and then Monday morning, Justin's just like fit to be tied, because he comes in and he's dealing with all the stuff I changed,
Right. So there's definitely some level of confidence you need to have in your provider, your MSP, or your internal IT, and it's unfortunately, like you're saying, David, the names are changing. Some, often they're changing, how things are done. That Gone is Intune right now. It's endpoint manager, and which makes more sense to me.
Yeah, right.
Because it's a little more specific to what it is. but again, all these nuances and changes that go on, you have to keep up with it, because it's. I'm reading an article from as recently as 2021, and go here and go here. Well, that's gone now.
Yeah.
That going here and going here no longer exists. You have to do it this way now. So that's one of the challenges that we face.
I will say this. You're right. It is a vast ecosystem, and it can be intimidating and complicated. But
Yeah.
by the same token, the benefits are huge.
Mhm.
If you can get with a provider or somebody who has a handle on that, the things your business will be able to accomplish using those tools. I'm sorry, but for 20 some odd dollars a month, I'm telling you, it's insane what they're giving you. Like, uh, just the like, I mean, we talk about this all the time, but I mean, there's so many tools that are in these things that people don't even know or don't even use and don't even know exist,
Yeah.
that they could be getting the value out of, and still be spending that 20 some dollars a month,
Yeah.
for that
It's
same
hard,
license.
at least for us, it's hard today to talk to. It could be a prospect, a client, or whoever, and have a conversation because we're trained to not be too technical to the people that we
Yes.
service, because it just, you don't want to, you don't want to lose them, right? But on the flip side of that, one of the challenges I think is the zero trust approach, the XDR, EDR conversation, the the backups, the DLP, the IRM. You go through all these acronyms, and it's like, to them again, it's all white noise, and but there's importance in every piece of this. So it's challenging for us to try to converse about this and get that message across. And that's a big part of that, I have to say, is building that client relationship and having that trust,
Yep.
that and understanding that we're not just giving you something that just to give you something so we can make a few dollars on it. It's a matter of us doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I'm working with car dealerships now in this whole FTC safeguard. By December 9th, they have to have a myriad of things done by the end of the year. And it's like, yeah, I mean, some of our clients are in a good place because of that, because they've listened and followed our guidance.
Sure. Right.
Now they're watching videos
And they're probably having a good time because they're like watching all their peers freak out and
well,
stress and
that's
struggle getting
exactly
through it all. But they're like,
exactly.
this is done. This is old news.
And they're watching videos from that we see from NADA and NADA, and basically telling them this is a $300,000 plus investment if you have nothing. So just be prepared to spend money. And from the encryption side to the mandatory pen testing, who's heard of that from a car dealership? It's like, yeah, this is what has to be done and in place. So
I mean, look, the bottom line is anymore, Brian, everybody needs to be doing these things because we're all so integrated and tied together. And it's about that supply chain. I tell people every day, like, the whole thing, oh, we're too small. I know we've been kind of fighting that objection for years, and we've been trying to
yep,
figure out how to let people know. But the reality is it doesn't matter how small you are, because you know other people. You either deal with other people, or you know them, or you communicate, and those people know other people, and they know people, and it's like the commercial. And I told two friends, but I'm sorry, sooner or later there's pay dirt, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're in a supply chain, and you're
Mhm.
part of the deal. And so that's it's you know it's our narcissistic way of looking at things in the United States, that people think hackers are after just the individual job, and it got nothing to do with you. It's a big picture, right? Like, they're looking for the long haul. They're going to get you, yes, but that's just a small piece of what it is they're trying to achieve today. They could care less. If it's not you, it's going to be somebody else. But
Yeah.
that's a stepping stone to get where they really want to be.
Yeah. And I think we find ourselves trying to come up with, when we try to explain what it is we're looking to implement and how to implement it, and we try to give examples that are relatable to so it's something that can be understood a little easier. And I think the challenges still are, well, if this person doesn't have access to this file, that's good enough for me. And it's like, well, but if we can go one step further and say that based on the tags we assign here,
Mhm.
it can never happen. It's just not like, and again, it's the conversations are tough. They're definitely
It is.
struggling, and I get the business owner's perspective. Like they kind of just put their hands up, like I don't know,
The two things that I have found some success in when it comes to that is storytelling, like you're saying, like, if you know of an example of whatever it is that they're talking about that you can bring to their, relation so they understand
Yeah.
that. But the other thing is I try and take executives, like when I'm trying to explain. So here's the dilemma, right? The Microsoft cloud. There are people in the IT industry who don't know what the Microsoft cloud is completely.
Right.
Like, it's not, for everybody, I guess. I don't know. I see no other way. To me, I don't know why you wouldn't be in the Microsoft cloud, but there are still folks who are technically adept, but don't know anything about the features or what all that stuff means up there in the cloud, what Azure AD is and why I care and all that.
Yep.
So what makes you think people are going to understand that, right?
Exactly.
Like just generally, it's not going to happen. So what I do is I try and take them into a presentation on the back end where I'm showing them the insights, right? So, hey, let me show you what your people have been doing. Let me show you, how your investment's paying off.
Let them see that.
Because
Let them see
that's
that.
what they care about, and they
Yep.
can relate to that, right?
Yep.
And so if they can start seeing that, then they know, oh, there's value back here. Like,
Absolutely. All right, very good.
All right, man. Another one in the bucket.
We did it.
Got music in the background.
That's our cue to get off stage. That's our
Get your FM DJ voice going. Welcome to Midnight with
there you go.
Brian and Dave on the reboot.
Awesome. All right, well, brainstorm for next week.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Sounds
I'll
cool.
See you. You got it. I'll see you next week.
We'll talk about Sim next week.
See you later.